Hey, thank you. And this is the Old Young Ones, and we are flooded with new information for this final episode of season 1, which means we are halfway through this podcast. We're almost out of it. We're gonna pack it up and check it right out the window. But today, Howie Weingarten is here as usual. Hello.
Hi.
And your mic is turned so far up.
There goes your hearing.
Coming back for his first time on the Old Young Guns, but a long-time stalwart of Caffeinated Comics is Joe Pakovits.
All right, yeah.
Good. Joe and I are actually facing each other, which only took 25 minutes to plug in. Howie's in upstate New York.
Mm-hmm.
And it took him like 5 seconds. Yeah.
You know?
We connected from the Chicago suburbs to Sleepy Hollow in 2 seconds. 6 inches apart, 25 minutes.
Hey, that's modern technology.
So we'll start off the way we usually start off. Joe, how did you get started watching The Young Ones? When was the first time you saw it?
I came along the first time in summer of 1985 when it appeared on MTV.
Wow.
So it hit me at the perfect time.
Yeah, you had MTV for number one. I didn't have we didn't have cable in 85.
We didn't have TVs. We walked.
We had shadow puppets.
We walked in the snow.
I could only do
5
Neo.
miles. No. Sorry, JoJo.
Right,
Mm-hmm.
Right in between freshman and sophomore year of college.
Mm-hmm.
And it was really the perfect time because even though I had been raised on PBS British comedies, you know, the BBC stuff, Monty Python, Two Ronnies, Dave Allen, all that stuff, and I was familiar with that kind of style of comedy, a lot of it seemed dated. A lot of it wasn't talking to me. A lot of it was using cultural references I didn't know.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
This was the first show that I really felt talked to people of my age.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's a good call because as we always say, Howie and I got to it about 10 years after that when Comedy Central picked it up. Yep. So we were it was
93, 94.
Yeah, it was the early 90s at that point. So
at least
we were watching this sitcom about punk while we were in the middle of grunge, but it just resonated.
Yeah.
So you were like
mid-20s.
Because 84 is the second season, which means MTV got it really, really quickly. I didn't realize they got it that quickly. Yeah, especially for British shows at that time. Like, you know, now we live in an era where Doctor Who is global on the same day, but back then it was like maybe a couple of years later. I remember seeing like Blackadder 1 in like 87 or something. And then it was years until I'd seen the whole series.
And back then, the U.S. was pretty much about 2 years culturally and politically behind the U.K. anyway. So they must have jumped on it as soon as they heard about it.
Yeah, and I think MTV jumped on it because MTV was the cool young network. Yeah. So they were like, we're the only ones that could handle this kind of show.
Oh, MTV back then was like subversive. That was like, you know, just like, it was just like, you know, MTV is just like, you know.
I love how long it took you to get to Yo. Were you thinking of Yo MTV Raps? Because I
was thinking of Yo MTV Raps. I was thinking of Headbangers Ball. I was thinking basically it's just like they were really subversive back then. It was just like he was the MTV. It was just like, whoa, hold on there, hold on, Sailor. What are you watching? You're crazy.
No, you didn't have the Comedy Channel till about 90.
That's right. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, like I think Nickelodeon wasn't even doing Nick at Night yet. Not in 85. I think they were still just...
It was still Nick in the afternoon.
They were just still like molesting children all day.
Well, now, hold on. That's another podcast.
There is a documentary.
I know, HBO.
I'm not casting aspersions.
You know? That's... oh, Lord.
Anything happens in Orlando. That's what we learned from that documentary.
Oh, off the rails.
Well, it's not like
4 minutes and 30 seconds.
It's not like we're covering Star Trek on the show.
That's true too. Yeah.
So anyway, we are. This is the 6th episode. This is the end of season 1, and starting from next episode, we're probably going to see some changes. But this is that last batch. So I think we can get right into it. I have a lot of thoughts about this one.
You know what the funny thing is? The funny thing is that this is the actual shortest episode of them all, but my notes are the longest for this one. It's unbelievable. It was just like, I fucking love this episode.
Well, I feel like this episode goes everywhere.
Yeah, it does. It certainly does.
Episodes and surreal as opposed to absurdist.
Yeah.
The opening is very Python-esque.
Very Python. And I was it's funny because I was thinking, oh, this is very Blackadder. And of course, Ben Elton would go on to Blackadder. But then I realized this is 82. There is no Blackadder.
Right.
That's right.
I thought that I had the wrong show. Because I had gotten into it when a friend of mine had called me and said, dude, you got to see this show. It's amazing.
Was this the first one you saw?
No, I saw Bomb was the first one.
Oh, okay.
Oh, good one.
So I'm coming in like halfway through the first season.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know what's going on. I have no context.
Right.
And by this time, I'm kind of figuring out who the characters are.
Sure.
And it's just, but then all of a sudden I turn on the TV and I'm seeing like a Python send-up.
Yeah, it's almost like making fun of Python. It's weird because it's like it's got a period piece. There's like a graveyard and there's very much one-liners.
The pilgrims and
like who's in the pit, and then the guy goes in and he goes like, I am in the pit. And it was almost making fun of that. And I know they revered Python. As we've been saying, they've been taking real shots at entertainment in the way that like SCTV did. But they did have respect for the Pythons. I mean, Terry Jones will show up in season 2, but when you get to the guy doing stand up, where he just takes the mic out and it's the hackiest joke you've ever heard. I'm like, wait,
it's bad.
What exactly are they doing with this?
I'm in the graveyard where so many comedians have died before me.
Yeah, I mean, like
that was a great line.
Two stereotypes for the price of one.
No.
It's an embarrassing joke.
Yeah, well, you know what?
I think they had the punk attitude. We call it a punk sitcom.
Mm-hmm.
And the punks both revered what had come before them, especially stuff, the original stuff in the 50s.
Yeah, I mean, the Ramones, every Ramones song is a 50s rock and roll song, yes.
Song. But on the other hand, it was always like, we respect you, but piss off. And we're done with you. Let's go somewhere else. Yeah. And I think that was kind of an opening salvo to Monty Python.
I think so. And it's interesting that it wasn't a cutaway. We don't start in the house. We don't start with the 4 guys. We start there. So it's really like, but it's after the title. That you do start with the title, like something like Nasty, which we'll see in the second season, starts with an altered title. Right. A lot of Monty Python episodes had no title for 20 minutes. But this is like, they said, this is the young ones, and then you go to the scene that has no connection to anything until Neil walks by and hits himself in the pan, which I feel like signifies that's the end of this kind of humor. Now we're going into this kind of humor.
Well, it's a funny thing because like that opening scene, I didn't even think about Python. I thought it was like the jokes that they were telling. I was getting the feel of like a Who's on First Abbott and Costello kind of ripoff. Like, who's in the pit? It's me.
Jokes. Real jokes.
And then there's a little bit of a mixture of a Three Stooges kind of thing, which is funny because we were talking about that. Because there's that thing of like the guy hits the other guy in the head. Like he's just like, how many graves have we dug today? It was like, it's just like, and then Neil's hit himself in the head. It's just like there's these like boing kind of like signs that kind of So for me, it was kind of like a kind of like a, I don't want to say a piss off, but it was kind of, to me, I saw like just kind of like a sticking it to like old time comedy, like Costello, like the Stooges.
But almost all of it, because it's like they're sticking to these old 40s routines, but they're doing it in a Python looking way.
Right.
Out on a bad day.
Who's in the pit? It's me. It's just no, not you. Just like it's just.
Throughout this particular episode, they make fun of certain kinds of comedy. We'll get to the cat in a bit, but where he's telling dad jokes.
Yes, so we go from that after Neil hits himself in the head. We cut to Rick, which I feel like Rick does all of Rick in about 3 minutes.
Yeah, he does.
because he's complaining that Vivian glued him to the window, but then Vivian didn't glue him to the window, and then they all fell for it. And then he
like the fascists they are.
Yeah, like the fascists they are. And then he starts doing a poem out of nowhere. Meringue, boomerang. It's like almost his. It's almost like Rick's audition to be in the show.
Yeah,
because Vivian and Mike do not get involved with him at all. They're both sitting down and reading.
I think he takes that pot shot at Genesis, which I thought was hysterical.
Yes.
I was just going to say, I'm so bored. I feel like I should be listening to Genesis.
And it's funny because well, they do that. I mean, they do that joke. The joke everyone remembers is nobody listens to me. I might as well be a Leonard Cohen record. But I forgot they also attacked Genesis.
Yeah.
And this is the point where Genesis has long missed Peter Gabriel. They had just released an album called Genesis, very pop record.
This is still Phil Collins as the front man?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's before he goes solo.
Because if this is 82, I mean, Genesis had this like one period where they were like extremely popular because it was more popish. And it's probably their dig at them for like,
just gone solo.
And Phil Collins eclipsed Genesis really quickly.
Yeah, he did.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
it was against all odds.
The studio.
Oh my God.
Against that. Again, it's that punk new wave thing coming out. But of course, by the time we're into post-punk.
Yeah.
They're taking shots at the old guard. And really, if you look at the cultural zeitgeist back then, the 5 albums in Britain in 1983. Thriller Michael Jackson, no surprise.
Right.
No Parlay by Paul Young, which I've just sent everybody under 40 into their search engine.
Every time you go away, Paul Young.
Yeah. And then Color by Numbers by the Culture Club. This is number 4. Fantastic by Wham is number 5.
Wham!
Genesis by Genesis.
So Genesis is in the like
9.
Yeah.
And Cliff Richard, by the way, his Silver album briefly reached number 7 on the chart.
All right.
We've completely positioned ourselves in that moment in time.
Yep.
Yeah. So I noticed this episode, it felt a lot like boring because for most of this episode, it's just a rainy day and they can't go out and they can't do anything. And which is interesting because boring is in the first season. So it's not like, oh, let's go back and explore some more. It's like, let's just use the same premise we used 2 weeks ago, but throw in different jokes.
Yeah. Well, it's definitely got a more surrealistic quality. It's got a dreamlike quality. Everything kind of loosely fits together on the surface.
Very loosely.
So tightly plotted.
Yeah. Whereas boring is more like a sketch show. Where it's like, we're doing this for 3 minutes. We're done. Now we're doing this for 3 minutes. And you're right. It kind of just meanders and ambles into things.
And that's why it hit us, in the 80s, it hit us as so new. Because it was really the first show that obliterated lines between sitcoms and sketch coms.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. So from here, we go into the whole thing with the comic book.
Oh, that was...
the first thing it throws me is like, that just looks like a newspaper. like how do you put that in a bag and board? How do you how do you keep that in condition? It was like this big flop. It seemed like it had no covers. It was just this big floppy thing. And then they get into this whole run of it all becomes gay jokes, which I braced a little bit. I was like, this is going to be dated, but it's actually not offensive.
No. Especially because Rick makes some actually good points,
and
this is where I think his send up of the ineffectual or smug leftist is so dead on, because it's like I knew people like this in college at the time, and it's like, look, you're saying all the right things, but you're turning people off just by being so childish and attention.
Well, because it's all about superiority. It's not. Right. It's not about that. I'm. Right. It's not about that I'm right. It's I'm right and you're right. Yes. Howie and I once did a sketch where people were protesting and they had no reason to protest, but they were wearing their ribbons and they were better than you.
You know.
Really what it was.
Yeah.
And that's what I was just saying that comes down to like a lot of things of today. People just, want to get up on their high horse or their soapbox, and instead of like maybe listening to somebody else who disagrees with you, all of a sudden you demonize them, and all of a sudden you don't want to have that conversation, and they're evil and they're bad, and that's it. And you've completely then just ostracized any sort of like, enlightened discussion.
Yeah, or you just build an alternative universe for yourself and crawl inside.
Right.
Yeah. But Rick's bubble is constantly popped by the three people around him who are different than him and hate it.
Yes.
Right. But it's always like they go to us like what we talked about on one of our, like, I think it was a couple of weeks ago, our podcast, where it was just kind of like, oh, you're the police are bad until, oh wait, we need them, and we'll discuss that later in like, in this podcast. It's just kind of like, it's just, as we said like a few weeks ago, people tend to talk the talk, but they can't walk the walk.
Right, and that's Rick's character.
And that's Rick's character all the time.
Yeah.
Ooh, I'm a criminal. How sexy is that? Oh, I'm going to go to jail. I'm going to get raped. Just like it was Neil. Neil did it.
But he has this whole run. He's like, why does there have to be so much fighting? Why can't there be peace and love in comics? And that's why they run on the gay thing. And I did write this down because I never heard it before. But Vivian goes on a rant, and at one point he says, Batman gooses the Joker's bottom. And I don't know why so many views to hear that.
Oh my God. Yeah, no, it's funny because especially when it goes to the poem itself, or sorry, where Rick imagines himself in the comic book, and he's just like the dream. The thing is that like there's like it's just like oh, you kids, we're coming to get you. It's just like, oh no, they like cover up their groins and stuff, with the cops, and it's just like
brutalizing. And it's that Electric Company Spider-Man panel.
Yes,
the way they always used to do it was like just
people's poet.
Yeah,
and then he does that poem, which is completely just freaking awful.
Yes,
but back then, like Mayo said in an interview, he had college kids giving these, poetry readings. He's just like, I just got to say, you guys are terrible. It's just, it's just, hey,
Yeah, and then they throw in the Batman sound effects on top of it as well.
Yeah,
Baku, I love that one. I never heard the thwack.
Thwack, yeah.
Bam. Baku is my favorite.
Yes.
Bam.
Yeah, it's weird that Buddy Holly dream is running underneath, and this happens again. There's musical cues, but they're so buried that it sounds like somebody just accidentally left the radio on.
Well,
when Neil is leaving the house, and I actually had to find that one, and that was a 1959 remake of a 1957 Belgian song in French about the rain coming again.
Oh, not the Eurythmics.
No, not the Eurythmics.
Wow.
No.
Oh, wow. So falling on my head like a memory.
They were digging deep, but they weren't calling that much attention to it.
No, it's just like in the background.
No?
Yeah, there it is.
Yeah. Yeah, so then we get to I was writing my notes, and I looked up, and I don't know how we got there, but you guys talked about this. How did they get to the cat doing stand-up?
The cat's got money in the kitty. There's money in the kitty. So Vivian's like,
we're not having breakfast.
Right. Yeah.
And go to the supermarket and go buy something. What do we need? Everything.
Oh, and that's what I love, where he goes, right, lentils, wallpaper. And it's only those two. Like, there's no rule of three. It doesn't keep going. But in fact, that jump from lentils to wallpaper. Well,
and the stuff that...
so genius.
Yeah, the stuff that they have in the fridges is like this green slob that's Rick spit on, so no one will eat it.
Yeah, they opened the fridge all the way this time because you were getting trapped in that fridge. People are falling out of that fridge, but this is the first time you really just see it.
And then there's that can of Coke that Neil's just like, oh, I bet this will play in like major later.
Yeah, that's where the whole plot is, if there's any plot. But I do, and it's the most obvious, and they make it the most obvious. It's like what he goes, he's like, He's like, it's a potion that turns you into an axe-wielding homicidal maniac. It's an antidote for not being an axe-wielding homicidal maniac. I put it in a Coke can so no one would drink it. And then Neil like puts it on, points, looks at the camera, goes, I bet at some point somebody's going to drink that and turn it into an axe-wielding homicidal
maniac. Yep.
I do love that. But why is the cat doing stand-up? This happens before. There's money in the kitty, and then
there's money in the kitty, and
but he's just
Joe, you got
talking about peas. He just does this pun about peas.
Yeah, he's just telling bad jokes.
Yeah.
Just a series of really bad jokes, and then they try to catch him, and he runs out the door.
And that's it.
That's it.
Every time the puppets come on, I grince.
Oh, I love the puppets. Oh man, I fucking love the puppets, dude. No, I love the puppets.
Be the puppet tiebreaker, Joe.
I love the puppets.
Thank you, Joe. Good man.
Me in my hate.
Nope.
Bad stand-up that was part of the BBC comedy for so long. Like people telling old jokes,
and they were the old comedy scene.
Right.
You know, there was so much of the old comedy is about making fun of the standards. Like we said, SCTV did it. Kids in the Hall did it. Mr. Show did it. Like that.
Right.
That like throwing the spotlight on what bad entertainment is, because these guys are brilliant entertainers and you have to sit through a lot of other entertainers when you are an entertainer.
Correct.
Yeah. So Neil goes out to the shops. There's a great line there, which I've always quoted, where he's like, I have to do all this for you. You treat me like your mother. No, we don't hate our mothers.
Yeah.
Wow.
Well, this scene really defines a lot of those character relationships. I mean, the best summary of Viv and Rick that comes in this thing where Rick goes, "You're deliberately trying to provoke me," and Vivian's like, "Yeah."
Yes, I am.
Yes, I am trying to provoke you.
Yeah, that's their dynamic. But then we go into the sketch of Rick and Aid as these like two twerpy spies that are conspiracy.
What was that?
I don't know, and it doesn't go anywhere. I was kind of.
I was one. First of all, I had to figure out who that was. I'm like, wait, that's Rick and Aid. Yes. Yeah, that is them.
It's like they're the fly on the wall, or they're the four horsemen of the apocalypse.
Dickie and Dino.
Yes, there's always a scene where Nigel Planner, there's a third. Usually not Chris Ryan, but they'll play different characters for a scene. But this had no connection to anything. It doesn't come back. It doesn't pay off. It's not a sketch in and of itself. It's just a chance for these two to do this different type of character.
Well, and then to make fun of the Manpower Services Commission, which was a real thing in Britain at that time.
What was it?
That was Thatcherite kind of corporate business, government alliance, retool the job market and provide job training. Because remember, when this was made, it was the high water mark for both Thatcherism and unemployment in Britain.
Wow.
So Power Services Commission, but
as being ineffectual,
you're not going to get that. So that whole cutaway is just. You just don't get it.
Yeah, but there's also just these absurdist jokes. First of all, I like the way they say binoculars. That was funny. That a few times, and then there's one joke that I wrote down where he goes, tell me if this sounds crazy. Nip, 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 bit. It was a nonsense joke, but I'm like, well, there's a joke. There's a joke, and then there's no ending to it. There's no punchline to it. We're just out of it.
Well, the Manpower Service Commission is the punchline, which if you don't know what that is and you don't have that cultural context, that whole scene is useless.
That makes sense.
Okay. Thank you.
The transition, we have no band in this. Instead, we have a lion tamer, which the plot, but how that was made.
Why?
They had to have some kind of cabaret element to get an increased budget.
Right. So but it didn't always have to be a band.
But it didn't have a band.
Yeah.
So I guess they maybe figured, well, we have a lion tamer, but he came cheap. I don't know.
And there is a tiger that you see in the opening. So it's like when they show that tiger, I'm like, okay, now that's where that tiger comes from. But that's all he does. And they play The Lion Sleeps Tonight, again, at that very low volume.
Yeah. It's like, that's the musical act, really. And it's funny because it's like Mike's like warning everyone, hey, there's a lion tamer in my bedroom. And it's just like, usually, with Mike, it's just like, well, it's kind of weird that it's in his bedroom because usually he's with the ladies up there of the inflatable variety.
Or the fairy tale princess.
Yeah. Right, exactly.
Watching the show, I was like, oh, that's the British Steve Dallas from Bloom County.
Oh, Mike? Oh, yeah, I can see that.
Because there were types. I mean, they were recognizable in the 80s.
The aviator glasses,
yeah. Right.
Metal guy.
Yeah.
Which I'm convinced, in my head canon, the fact that Vivian is both a punk and a metal guy is an inside joke, because in Britain those two subcultures hated each other.
Right, yeah, because he's a punk with spiked hair, but he has a denim jacket that says very metal.
It says very metal.
Yeah.
Very metal.
Yeah, and he does say when Rick says, Vivian, why don't you go out? He goes, I don't want my forehead to rust.
Yeah.
Which is really great because he's got the 4 stars on there, which is almost never remarked upon. I don't know how they're in there. I don't know if they're glued to there, but they never come out.
They never come out.
Yeah, a lot of the comedy in this show comes from what they don't point out, the things that they just ignore.
Yeah.
Sure. Oh, yeah.
Where you're expecting it to be mentioned, and nobody says a thing.
Well, it's like
accept it.
It's like The Fifth Roommate, which I still have never seen.
I've never seen him.
No. Yeah, and even the rewatch, I've never seen The Fifth Roommate. It's always like, it's like The Ring. It's just a guy sits in the corner for like one shot.
Yeah, in this one, she floats outside the window.
Okay.
In one of the later scenes.
Okay. See, you caught it. I know she exists, but I've never, ever seen it. So then they're bored. Again, we're back to boring. They don't know what to do.
Right.
And Rick says, we're adults. He's like, we can drink. We can do things to girls. We should figure something out. And they immediately play hide and seek.
Hide and seek.
And then this is where the lion tamer comes back, because Neil opens the bedroom, sees the lion, and poops himself. There's no dialogue. That's it.
Hey, you gotta love a good poop joke.
Yeah.
A fart and a poop. Come on.
After he rescues the kittens when he first comes in.
Right. Yes.
Rescued the kittens.
Yes.
So, but then we never see them again.
No. We do have maybe my favorite Rick Mike exchange in the whole series is when Mike's hiding in the cupboard. And he finds right away, and he's like, look, I'm the best at playing games in here, so find everybody else and come to me. Yeah. And he's like, all right, that's a great hiding place, Mike.
That is.
It's such a great Mike, the cool person. And it's one of the few times, because Chris Ryan was a last-minute addition, because the original guy who was part of the scene like wanted too much money and didn't get along with the director. Great career move. But it's one of the few times they play with Chris Ryan's size.
Right.
Because
right.
Tuck up in there.
5-0.
Yeah, I mean, he played a Sontaran in Doctor Who. It's like that's the other role you give to Chris Ryan.
He was what, Dave Hedgehog in Bottom?
Yes, he was Dave Hedgehog, and he was in Absolutely Fabulous.
Yeah,
and a bunch of these.
Love Chris Ryan.
Well,
yeah,
Rick Mayall had an interview where he said that it was a nuclear family where Mike's the father,
right?
Mother,
mm-hmm.
Vivian's the rebellious son, and Rick is the daughter.
It fits
a lot of sense.
Yeah. It fits.
Yeah,
I agree.
So they're playing hide and seek, and now in what is a typical Young Ones cutaway. And Joe, I want you to talk to this because I feel like you're more than well versed. We just get a lot of Narnia.
Yeah, we get a lot of Narnia. He goes into the world. Well, first of all, Rick comes out, and Vivian's just sitting on the stairs smoking a cigarette.
Yeah,
and, like Rick's like, "Why aren't you hiding? What's wrong with you? How come nobody can play this game right?" It's like enforcing the rules.
Yes.
The anarchist is enforcing the rules.
Yeah.
So he turns his back for 5 counts.
Right.
What Vivian does is walk into the wardrobe that's right there.
Yeah, and he's been in that wardrobe before. Yeah. Like when in Tom, he wants to blow up the wardrobe, and they
kick him in there. That's right.
In there. But this time it's Narnia.
This time he goes in, and it's Narnia. So he goes in there. And it's like this Narnia dream sequence in winter.
Well, it's all the opening scene, the Turkish delight, the prophecy when he says the lion, they freak out. Yeah.
But then he's like totally rude and Vivian like. Would you like some Turkish delight? No, you got a kebab.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah, and David Rappaport comes back because he was already fatumch and boring.
Yep.
And he's got the two greatest lines. Because he keeps saying, it's the prophecy. And then when he grabs him and he goes, it's revolting. You're revolting. And it's in that voice, which always takes me back to Time Bandits, which is like.
He even takes off his beard.
Yes.
Yeah, he does.
Like
people like you should be put in a small box and tied with string and left in a room without electricity.
Says who?
Says who? Says me.
For a month.
And then it becomes, his name is Shirley. And they're making fun of
Shirley.
Because they're Vivian and Shirley.
Well, you're Vivian. You know?
Yeah. And again, doesn't really go anywhere.
No.
That's about there is a sketch in there of like putting a punk in Narnia. But that's it. Then he wanders out and he just ends up in the basement. By the way,
who's the queen? Who's the queen, by the way?
Well, that's it's the Ice Queen from The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe.
Right, but who played her?
I did not recognize her.
I didn't recognize her at all.
No.
Oh. All right. Well, whatever. So he goes back into the basement.
Yeah, in the basement fireplace. When I'm like,
the basement, and
is it a British thing to have a fireplace in your basement?
I don't know.
It may have been
Did they have
a mantelpiece?
Did they have a fireplace in the basement on Horror of Dracula when they go down there and it's like, oh, there's a coffin down there.
Oh.
You know, of course, that's like 100 years before. Yeah. Hey, Dracula's the brownstone. That's pretty good.
Those castles, they had like 17 fireplaces because you couldn't heat it any other way.
You know?
But there's a slapstick between Rick.
Why I brought that up, I have no idea.
There's a slapstick sequence between Rick and Aid, which is very typical. But Rick
he takes his button, the button.
Mm-hmm.
He takes the button from his lapel and stabs him with it.
Yeah, and then he takes a fork and stabs him in the head. Yeah. And the thing that disturbs me about it is there's no sound effect for that. It just happens.
Yeah.
It makes it feel more real.
And Vivian just ignores it.
Oh, it's there for a while.
Throws the axe at him. And the whole thing starts because Vivian has set Rick's course bed fire in his bed.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. Rick's bedroom was on fire, which, by the way, the worst green screen I've ever seen.
Oh.
The fire is like
bad.
That was worse than Doctor Who.
Yes, which is
a
lot.
That's saying something.
That was bad. That was really bad.
Yeah, but this is when this is when they find out that London's flooded, and they figured out that Mike goes, London has flooded. They don't deduce it. There's no gradual getting there.
Mike just comes in and just says, if this house is a bottle, I'm the message. London has flooded. I'm just like,
brilliant.
He said something earlier, and he goes, well, if you got to sing, you might as well be original. What does that mean, Mike? Yeah. I don't know.
Yeah.
And he's like, are you with me? And Vivian just goes, no, I have no idea what you're saying.
Yeah, this is a really good Mike episode.
It really is. And it's funny because a
lot.
No, but he's got his moments, yeah.
Characters. Well, because they figured out who he is.
Yes.
Right.
He's finally the straight man.
Yes. Yeah, and it works. But now we get to the flood plot. We're about 20 minutes in.
Right.
We get to the flood plot. There is a cutaway to a radio station, which is Ben Elton and Lisa Mayer. Where she's cut her arms off.
Cut her arms off.
Yes. How long have you been in the music business? Since lunchtime. How'd you get started? Oh, I was working in the laundromat at King's Road, and the guy lit my leg, and that's how it went.
He's like,
so why'd you cut your arms off? Well, it's
an urban kind of
apparently.
Yeah, apparently.
Something like that.
The radio station. That's the end of that.
And that's it. They run out.
Freaks out and runs. Yep, you never see them.
And knocks her over.
Yeah. Yes, exactly.
Just knocks her over.
I do love
the one without arms.
It's not great. Really mentioned, but I do love the cardboard submarine that Vivian is building. And
cardboard submarine.
It's been crushed.
This is so typical of you, Vivian. What do? Build a submarine.
And the argument, he goes, is there any room for me? No. I want to see you drown. So
I'm not even taking SPG. Oh, yeah, we'll see about that, Pally. I love SPG.
SPG, which again, you mentioned this before, Howie, looks completely different.
Always looks different.
This one, he's just basically like a stuffed pod.
Yeah, it looks like
a big fat hamster rat thing.
Yes.
Yeah, with eyes.
So
you know?
Saying, well, first of all, Rick is begging Vivian for a spot in his cardboard submarine.
Right.
Which, of course, Vivian fashion denies it.
Yes.
And then he says, "Would I save any of you? I'm not even saving the SPG." So if he's like attacks him, he goes right for his neck.
You know,
the hammer out.
And then Vivian takes up with a hammer and he throws him outside.
And he, yeah, then he goes play with the sharks. And then there's a scene with SPG and a shark.
Oh, I loved your movie.
And SPG asked for his autograph.
That's great.
With the worst shark puppet I've ever seen.
Oh my god! One thing though, I think we need to talk about is that Alexei Sayle, because he comes in right before
where Alexei comes in. Yeah,
you know, he comes in before the submarine and right after throwing the axe at Rick, and to me, like this was Alexei Sayle's best episode. I loved him.
I disagree because I feel like this is the most integral he is to the plot, but I find him so annoying in this one.
Because I love him in this one.
These separate scenes of him wandering around going, "Oh, hello, boys," and then shrieking.
You know,
it's like,
"Oh, Coca-Cola, symbol of Free West."
Yeah,
I love that line.
You've said that many times.
Yeah, and a lot of times I was just like, "Where the hell did that come from?" It's like, "Shit, it's the young ones."
That's where it came from. But
you know.
I get the point, but I feel like there's a lot of dead air of Alexei Sayle because he goes into Narnia, he comes out of Narnia, nothing happens to him in Narnia.
No.
He doesn't chop up David Rappaport with an axe.
No. They're not even there.
No, they're just using the sets. That set. Say the same thing you said before.
And
Little pigs.
For me, just fell totally flat.
Well, first of all,
really? Okay.
Halftime report comes 3 minutes before the episode.
The halftime report, I think, is great. I think that's a step. Ooh, where's my Volvo? Oh my god! It's just. And Mr. Poo Poo goes to potty or something.
Ooh, where's my Volvo?
Yes.
Ooh, where's my Volvo?
That is great. I loved him in this episode. I gotta say, you know, it's just like there's sometimes I don't understand what he's saying, but this episode I was just kind of like, I don't know. I just thought I thought this was his best episode. Just me.
Yeah, Alexei Sayle's very polarizing. He's polarizing for me episode to episode. But
that is true. That's very true.
While this is going on, they start to talk about cannibalism really quickly, like quicker. And in Bomb, they went and they got takeout. But in this,
you know,
I love the line where Neil goes,
I hope
we ended up having to eat each other like that film. We ended up
having to eat. Yeah.
That might be my favorite joke in this episode.
That's a really good one.
The title is "We Ended Up Having to Eat Each Other."
You know, I think my favorite joke was probably right on the footsteps of that was is it's like Neil's got the question. He's just like, he goes, "What's hunger? All we got to do is turn the ratio around." You know what I'm talking about? Yeah. He's just like, not enough food, too many people. What if we just turn the ratio around? I think that was I think my favorite joke.
It didn't hit me till this rewatch where he goes, "Who's going to the pot?" It's really quiet, and Rick goes, "Me." No, I'm kidding.
No, I'm kidding.
I for some reason that joke never popped to me, and then I was like, "Oh, that might be my second favorite joke." But of course, it's Neil.
Yeah.
By the way, a lot of smoking in this episode.
Yeah.
A lot.
Yeah, everybody's smoking.
Everyone is smoking.
Mike's smoking Neil's last cigarette.
He also lights a cigarette on the when the bed's on fire.
Yep.
There's like it's the 80s, so there's casual smoking, but it's like they went back to it a few times.
Yeah.
Yeah, so of course then they all try to kill Neil, which I think is, a trope at this point. Yeah.
Everyone's always trying to kill Neil.
And this is when Alexei Sayle becomes the axe-wielding homicidal maniac and hacks through the door. This is
The Shining.
Yes, this is the Shining moment. He's got a lot of
very good.
a lot of lines which I also find interesting and annoying. Like Jersey wants to finger your entrails has never left my brain, and I don't know. And I don't know if I resent.
I don't think that was in the script.
When little boys come out to play on the busy motorway.
I thought that was great.
How much of that was scripted? I don't know.
I'm sure there was a lot scripted, and he did them all, and then kept going.
And then they cut them.
Yeah, but I
just picked the best one.
I do love Rick's excuse where he goes, "There's nobody here. We're all holograms."
Holograms.
Oh my God, that's a great joke.
And Neil's speaker shows up in this because they try to.
Oh my God!
And the speaker comes like, "I don't want to go there."
Yeah, and you know what's funny? We brought this up in Bomb because it's Human Bomb, and I was saying like Neil wakes up and there's a puppet Marshall, which is spelled with a T, and I'm like, why would they do that? The Marshall doesn't do anything. It's because they built it for this episode and just left it there for the other episodes. But I love Marshall spelled Martial.
I love what.
Speaker mouth.
Yeah, I love when he goes, no, don't do that. Jimi Hendrix once pissed on that.
Hendrix once pissed on it.
And
wow.
This is where the halftime report comes in, which again I think is an interesting idea. I don't know that it completely works.
The full one, but no, it's just
like.
And again, I think some of these were of their time, and they just don't age.
Well, it's also that structure of we'll let Alexei Sayle just do some stand. You know, like how many episodes does he drop character? Where he's just like there was an episode. I think it's the first episode where he goes back to the acting when they come in, because like he'll be a Russian landlord and then he'll just do a bit about his neighbors. You know, it's like they just kind of carve out some space for Alexei because you could tell he's the big guy in the scene, but he's not going to be the biggest star.
Right.
But they all look at him like he's the star, and this is something when I was in stand-up, the guys we all thought were going to be the most famous are not as famous as a lot of the guys that I knew that. You never know. But he was clearly the big fish in that.
He was the Godfather.
He was the Godfather in their stand-up scene before they started going into the TV.
Right. You know.
Exactly.
One of the funny things about that scene where they're trying to hide from Alexei Sayle is that Mike is just standing there the whole time with just a blanket over his head. That's his whole thing.
Yes.
That's how he hides.
Yes.
You know, I thought that was it's like a little bit under the radar, but it's just like this is Mike the cool person, you know, the guy who, you know, never, you know, stays, you know, calm, cool, collected, and he just throws a blanket over himself trying to escape some guy with a, you know, yielding an axe. I thought that was hysterical.
Finally cut the hole in the wall with the electric saw thing that they were going to kill Neil with.
Yes.
No, don't cut like that. You want to cut like this.
Yeah.
Yes.
Hold it this way.
And then the flood's just gone.
Yeah. Then they run upstairs.
Yeah.
And Alexei chases them, and he runs into the lion tamer room, and that's it.
And that's it.
Thing, you know,
so we paid that off at least.
Yeah. You know,
the lion tamer had a reason in the story for existing.
And then here comes SPG.
Yeah,
right?
SPG paddling, which it looked like a wound up like flipper frog thing.
You know,
like put that they flopped. And just
it's like
on a can.
And he's running Cuban's ale beer can.
A beer can.
Branch in his mouth.
With an olive branch or something, like a Noah's Ark thing.
Yeah, a Noah's Ark thing, exactly.
The rainbow and everything like that. Yeah. So
it's a different theme song. It's not the
it's not the usual.
It's a theme song that like concludes the series because it's the young ones, but like an orchestral, like keyboard synthesizer version of the young ones. It's not that ska thing.
Right.
That's at the end.
I wonder if this was deemed like the last episode. I wonder if they thought like, all right, well, this is it. You know, we'll end on SPG. Everyone loves SPG. So, and I wonder if at this point, did they know that they were going to have another season?
Well, it was a hit right out of the gate. And that's something I've been realizing lately researching this is like.
Well, they took some time off. They definitely took time off. Yeah.
Most British series are like movies where they do a season and then if it's successful a couple of years later, they'll come back. I mean, Blackadder was separated by 2 years. I think Fawlty Towers was 2 years between. So
that I did not know.
It's more like they made a sequel to the series more than they made the next season.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's good.
Especially true for comedy shows.
Yeah, it's like you get it. Well, it's kind of like how television is now. You get a chance to miss it.
Yeah.
You know, you get 10 episodes, and maybe a year later, you hear that they're going to make some more, and you know, it's not the network version of like of waiting around. It's like I have to wait all summer for new episodes. It's like no, it's kind of done. It's like
and it was interesting seeing their learning curve from season 1, from episode 1 to episode 6. Very do-it-yourself ethos.
Yeah.
Which was common in that era. Very, very punk.
Yeah, very punk.
Very, hey, let's go do a show.
And I think watching it now, that's what makes it stand out more than anything. Like when I first discovered it in my 20s, in the when we were college students, it was like I was pulled in by the energy of it. I love like how high energy it was. I was a 19-year-old with way too much energy. So
no, not you.
So I had a tendency
heck you say.
I had a tendency to climb things as I was talking.
No. That's bullshit. Bullshit.
Those days are long gone.
Yeah.
Now I walk to work and I get tendonitis.
I got a question.
Yeah, that's what pulled me in was how manic it was and how much it moved around. And now it's just the DIY is what I think I find so impressive.
Yeah, and that goes. They're really tapping into the punk ethos. All the people who are writing this show were born in 1958 or 1959.
Like Sting, born in the 50s.
Which means that they were students.
Yeah.
The punk era of 77, 78, 79.
Wow. And that's true. Yep.
All about do it yourself. In fact, you have a band called the Desperate Bicycles who wrote a song called Handlebars, where at the end of it, they're like, it was easy. It was cheap. Go do it. And you get the Buzzcocks and the Sex Pistols after that. And it's a lot of people in Britain reacting against the control of both Thatcherism and the corporatist policies.
Right. Because there's an oppression.
Got a lot of time on their hands.
Right.
Especially among the young.
Mm-hmm.
And they have cheap technology for the time, that they can go and do stuff like.
Well, it's doable.
You could press a record, maybe make 200 copies for a couple $100, and then see if it goes anywhere.
Well, it's like in the 90s, like we were so happy to get a video camera. Yeah. And it was like, oh my God, we can make a movie. We can make a sketch with this. Like just to have the tools to be able to do that was so huge. And then as the decades went on, it's like you look back and you're like, God, it's so easy to make anything. I mean, we're making a show right now.
Exactly.
And this is the kind of things we talked about in the 90s of that DIY-ness. And I think that was another thing why it appealed to us a little later in the 90s, because grunge also had that ethos. Yeah. The difference is you had Clinton in the White House, so there was this kind of there was a more 60s kind of freedom to it. Then there was also the depression of Gen X.
Right.
Undercut everything. Is like nothing's worth doing. I would say this about grunge was that that the Gen Xers just picked up the discarded guitars and amps from the boomers when they got tired of them and made something new out of it. And then the millennials had a computer, so they didn't need any of that stuff.
Right, sure.
These guys picked up the discarded comedy of the late 60s, early 70s and made something new out of it.
And even though it was a BBC show, it's not like it was a public access thing, or it wasn't like a video or an indie movie. They had the BBC behind them. They made sure to keep that spirit going through. Like they weren't going to spend a lot on puppets. They weren't going to spend a lot on blue screens.
Something and they didn't. And they certainly did not.
Working on a budget. This wasn't the typical BBC high budget period drama of, hey, let's go back to the 1800s.
Right, and
this was about right now, and it was daringly anti-Thatcherite, very political, very of its time, and in certain respects, it was also ahead of its time. I think this was the first show that I saw, at least, where I'm not supposed to like any of these guys.
Exactly.
That was a revelation for me. I think
that was great.
That and Blackadder, and those two series are almost the same. I mean, you have Ben Elton on both, and then they share everybody. Yeah. You know, Tony Robinson will appear on the young ones. Robbie Coltrane will appear on the young ones. Emma Thompson will appear, and Hugh Laurie will appear, and Stephen Fry.
Yep.
And then, of course, you know, Rick Mayall shows up on Blackadder. Adrian Edmondson shows up on Blackadder. Nigel Planner shows up on Blackadder. You have all these crossover, but I think but I remember watching Blackadder, which I got into before Young Ones, and that's where the screw turned in my head. I was like, oh, I'm not supposed to root for the main character.
You're not.
It took America a long time to get there, and I think you started to have that with things like The Simpsons. But now you're at a point with like Always Sunny, and it took me 7 episodes to get into Always Sunny, and when it finally turned for me, it was the same thing. It was like, oh, this is like the young ones. Yeah. I'm not supposed to want them to succeed.
Yeah. This is more people just being horrible to each other.
Yeah, because you spend episodes going, these people are assholes, and then
they really are. Unfortunately, they are.
Always Sunny, there were a couple of years of I flipped through it on FX, and I was like, oh, this is like dude bro comedy. I hate these guys, and then then Comedy Central would rerun them, and I realized, oh, they're stupid and they deserve to fail.
That's right.
No one's is completely that.
Yeah. Well, it's funny because like the thing that really brought me into this show was the stream of consciousness. Because a lot of times, like I remember, like just having dreams, and they made no sense, but they made me laugh when I talked about them, like afterwards, and I was just kind of like,
I still remember some of them because you would tell them to me.
Yes. And the funny thing is that this was the first time I'd ever seen a show actually just go from, say, what are they doing to, like, oh my God, I cannot believe they, and that made no sense. And I kind of don't want it to make sense because I'm enjoying it. This is like a ride. It's like a trip, and I'm enjoying it. And this is like, just keep this going. And I enjoy seeing the things of comedy that are not the traditional, way to do things. The like what we've been talking about, like not liking the main characters. It's just like some people will not like the show immediately because the characters are unlikable and they just scream at each other.
Isn't that what your wife said?
Exactly. That's exactly what my wife says.
Which I realize came out as an insult. That's what your wife says.
That's what my wife says. I'm a bum.
Take my wife. She hates the young ones.
Yeah.
We had never seen anything like this.
Nah, no way.
Again, we've seen Python. Python takes normal situations and stretches them into absurdism.
Like the dead parrot, for example.
Clear demarcation line between that and the next sketch. This had a series of sketches that were only loosely connected by a plot.
Right.
Think about it and you analyze it behind the scenes, that has to be so tightly plotted. But the effect is, like Howie said, it's a dream. It's very much like a dream, where a bunch of images that have a kind of an overall theme, but they can also be standalone. Like
correct.
Right. Yeah, they don't have to pay off. They don't have to come back later. They don't have to tie anything up. As we said, I think every episode this season, the season is like, and then it just ends. Not a satisfying ending in any of these 6.
No, that means it doesn't need to be. I got a question for the both of you. Being that we've now come to the end of season 1, what's the most powerful or funniest? What's your favorite episode of this first season?
That's a good question. Now, Joe, I'm assuming you rewatched more than Flood.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, I figured.
Oh, yes. I watched them all. Because I was kind of wanted to see the arc and wanted to see what happens in this that might happen.
So what's your favorite?
Probably Flood. It has 2 of my favorite gags. The cardboard submarine and Mike in the cupboard. Although the hands up, who likes me is my favorite.
Yeah, but I think that's in season 2.
Bambi. That's Bambi.
Yeah.
But
that is in Bambi.
My favorite.
Yeah, I think I have to go Bomb. I used to say Demolition. I think it's a great pilot, but I think when we were talking about Bomb a couple of episodes, I felt like everything came together in the right ratios. Like Flood for me has some dead spots. There is like Alexei Sayle just wandered around the house for a while. And there's boring was when we were talking about boring's with peaks and valleys because it was about them being bored. So like the energy would start to go up and they would kill it. And the energy would start to go up and they would kill it. But I feel like Bomb, everything is right. Howie, answer your own
I'm
question.
Gonna say I gotta go with Joe. Flood. I love Flood. Although a very close second
up on me a lot.
A very close second is Oil.
Oh well, that's season 2. We're not talking about season 2 yet.
No, Oil is season 1.
Oh yeah, you're right. Oil. I was thinking of Time because Time starts with Dallas.
Right.
Yeah, Oil is the second episode. You're right.
Oil's a good one because he's just like when they're on the floor and the guy's like, "Ha, missed both my legs," when he swings the bat. Right. And then El Presidente. Mike is El Presidente was hysterical. And then there's that one that moment of Vivian where he's the most calm. We said this in the second podcast. The most calm and rational he's ever been. He's just like, Neil, it's all right. It was soon to happen, sooner or later. And then he just falls. But I think Flood is mine because I also do love the submarine. I like Alexei Sayle and the halftime report. And I just to me in this one episode, the puppets really, really take a step lower. I mean, SPG is awful. SPG is awful. That cat is terrible. No, they get worse. Like even SPG when he was just like, oh, I smell like a student's armpit. He looked better there than he did in this Flood episode, and I love the fact that it was just like I think they were just trying to make it as terrible as possible, and I commend them for that.
Well, I've got a question for you guys. So we're halfway through, right? They figured out who the characters are, and so we know who they are. So any kind of show like this, the obvious question comes up, who do you relate to the most out of the 4 of them?
Yeah, we've talked about this before. It's like I feel like I have my moments of each one of them.
Yeah, that is true.
I feel like each one of them just taps into a different impulse. So I don't know. And it's one of those where, my favorite, it's like, who's your favorite Beatle? It changes, I was in high school, I was really into John. And then in my 30s, I was really into George, and now I'm more into Paul. And it's like there's no dead spot. I mean, you can mention Ringo, but there's no dead spot in the 4 of them. So I can't say I lean more towards one than the other.
As I've gotten older, I have a real appreciation now for Mike because, actually, when I was younger, I was just kind of like, I wonder what this guy's doing in this show. And he's just like, he's got some funny lines, and I like the way he plays off the 3 others. But what is he doing in this show? Now I get it. Now I totally get Mike, and I'm just like kind of like, as younger, I probably related more to Vivian, and now I feel like more like Mike. Really, I mean, I still love Vivian. Would probably still always be my favorite. But I've really trended a little bit more towards Mike as I've gotten older.
Mike's the most mature one. I think
in a way, yes.
There's definitely there's definitely moments. Well, this concludes season 1. We're gonna roll right into season 2, so the podcast won't take a break. I mean, there's only 12 of these, but
there's no 2-year break.
Season 1's been great. Joe, thank you for coming over.
Thank you, Joe.
We appreciate it, you guys.
The first in-person guest. Watch this.
Look at that.
There you go. Look at that. Yes, that's a spirit.
Yeah. But I also want to thank everyone we've had on this season. Everyone's been so much fun. We've had Mike Brum, who had never seen it. We had Michelle Saleo twice. And
Andrew.
Andrew, who we hadn't talked to in years and years, and we picked up where we left off. And now Joe. It's been so much fun to do this, guys. By the way, some of these podcasts have done pretty well on YouTube. They're not viral. Nobody's making any money on this, but they are bigger than we thought. So we really appreciate you guys.
Really, if more than 10 people watch, it's like, wow, that's pretty cool. More than 10 people.
Of course, the audio comes out a week before, so you can subscribe anywhere you get podcasts, and you can hear this in audio. And then a week later, you guys have been watching these, and it's been great. And we've got a lot of surprises for season 2. We've got a lot of people that are people that are coming back. Some of the best episodes are yet to come. So,
well, that's the thing. It's just like we're going to start like next episode. We're going right into Bambi, which is probably the gold standard.
It's a pillar
to me. That's some little Motorhead, some university challenge. That's going to be, that may be a 2-hour podcast.
Yeah, we actually have no guests for that because we figured we would talk right over them. And it still might be a 2-hour podcast.
Yeah, this might be a long one. So
but we will see you in a couple of weeks for that. Thanks,
everybody.
Because we may not be the young ones very long.